What if I told you the biggest mistake you're making this February has nothing to do with your lure, your line, or your spot? What if it's the simple fact that you're fishing 10 to 15 feet too deep? Today, we are tackling a massive, costly mistake many good anglers make, assuming winter pike are always glued to the bottom. I'm going to show you why those big, supposedly lethargic pike are often secretly suspended way up in the water column, just waiting for a meal. This is the very reason so many people go home skunked, while a handful of others are quietly pulling in monsters. So let me ask you, and be honest, how many times have you automatically dropped your lure straight to the bottom the second the water gets cold? Let me know in the comments. For decades, the book on winter pike fishing has been pretty simple. Fish deep and fish slow. It makes a certain kind of sense, doesn't it? The water is cold, a fish's metabolism slows down, so common wisdom says they must be on the bottom, conserving energy. We've heard it from our granddads, we've seen it in old fishing shows, we've read it in magazines until it became gospel. For most of us, it's just muscle memory now. You get to a winter spot, and your first instinct is to find the deepest hole and work it to death. But here's the problem with that muscle memory. It's often flat out wrong. This single rule is causing you to miss the most active, willing to feed fish in the entire lake, and you are meticulously fishing an empty, dead zone while the real party is happening right over your head. Let's start by properly burying that old myth. The idea that pike turn into lazy bottom-dwelling slugs in winter is an oversimplification. Yes, their metabolism slows compared to summer, but it doesn't just shut off. They still need to eat to survive the long, cold season. In fact, they are opportunistic predators. And opportunity rarely waits at the bottom of the lake. Think of a wolf in the winter. It doesn't just go to sleep in a deep valley and hope a rabbit falls in. It goes where the rabbits are. Pike are no different. They are programmed for one thing: find the most efficient meal possible. And in February, that meal is almost never crawling on the mud. Believing they are just waiting down there is the first step toward a long fishless day on the water. So if they aren't always deep, what's the real driver of their location? It's one word: forage. Bait fish. That is the beginning and the end of the story. Pike are slaves to their food source. Wherever the main concentration of bait fish goes, the pike will eventually follow. They are not going to waste precious energy sitting in 25 feet of water if the buffet is happening at 10 feet. The single most important question you should ask yourself when you get to the lake is not where is the deepest spot. It's where are the cisco, the smelt, the shad, or the perch. If you can answer that question, you will find the pike. Everything else, from structure to water temperature, is secondary to the location of their next meal. Now let's meet the main characters in this story, the suspended baitfish. We're talking about species like cisco, tullibee, smelt, and sometimes even schools of shad or perch. These are not bottom-oriented fish. They are pelagic, meaning they live in open water, often far from any structure. They spend their lives roaming the water column, feeding on plankton. And where does plankton thrive? It thrives where there is sunlight penetration. This means these baitfish schools will often suspend high up in the water column, sometimes just a few feet under the ice, to get that sunlight. They form huge, dense schools like a living cloud of protein. This cloud is the mobile restaurant that every big pike in the lake is looking for. Here is a simple way to visualize this. Imagine the lake is a tall building with 20 floors. The old school thinking tells you the pike are all hiding in the basement on floor 1, but the cafeteria full of all the food is on floor 10. Does it make any sense for the pike to wait in the basement, hoping a piece of food falls all the way down? Of course not. They are going to take the elevator up to floor 10 and hang out right outside the cafeteria doors, waiting for an easy target to wander out. That's exactly what suspended pike are doing. They position themselves around and below these massive schools of baitfish, using almost no energy, just waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They are not lethargic. They are efficient. Let's touch on a couple of other factors that push these baitfish up: light and oxygen. As I mentioned, the zooplankton that baitfish feed on need light. In winter, especially with snow cover on the ice, light penetration is weak. The most viable zone for this life is often in the top third of the water column. Furthermore, in some lakes, especially later in the winter, decomposition on the bottom can use up dissolved oxygen, creating a less hospitable zone down deep. The baitfish, and therefore the pike, will naturally move up toward more comfortable, oxygen-rich water. So you have this perfect storm. The food is up high, the light is up high, and the best water is up high. Why would a pike choose to be anywhere else? This is where your electronics become your absolute best friend. If you have a fish finder, a flasher, or sonar of any kind, this is its time to shine. Don't just use it to find the bottom depth. Your main mission now is to scan the entire water column for signs of life. You are looking for those big, dense clouds that mark a school of baitfish. You might see them 10 feet down over 30 feet of water, or 15 feet down over 50. These are not random marks. This is the dinner table. You might also see thicker individual lines hanging just below or to the side of these bait clouds. Guess what those are? Those are your target pike sitting in ambush mode. Your electronics are your underwater eyes, showing you exactly where that cafeteria is located today. So, what exactly are you looking for on that screen? Don't get discouraged if you don't see perfect cartoonish fish arches everywhere. You are hunting for a cloud or a smudge on your sonar. A dense ball of bait fish will often show up as a large, fuzzy mass that slowly moves across your screen. It might be 5 feet thick and 20 feet wide. That is the jackpot. Sometimes you'll see your lure dropping through it, and the screen will just light up with interference. Anytime you see this, you stop everything. This is your spot. The pike will not be far away. Learning to identify these bait balls is more important than identifying a piece of structure. The bait is the structure. But what if you don't have a $500 fish finder? Are you out of luck? Absolutely not. You just have to think a little differently. You can't see the suspended bait, so you have to fish high percentage areas where they are likely to be. Instead of looking for deep holes, look for structure that has significant vertical relief. Think of things like steep shoreline drop-offs, underwater points that extend way out, or sunken islands and humps that come up very high. Pike will use these vertical structures like highways, moving up and down them to intercept cruising schools of baitfish. The key is that the structure gives them a reference point in the vast open water. So let's define the magic depth. The most important thing to understand is that it is not a fixed number. It's not always 10 feet or 15 feet. The magic depth is the baitfish zone, and it changes daily or even hourly based on light conditions and other factors. Your job as an angler is to find that zone. If you have electronics, it's easy. You see it on the screen. If you don't, you have to find it through experimentation. You fish these vertical structures at different depths. You might spend 20 minutes fishing the 15 to 20 foot zone, and then another 20 minutes fishing the 10 to 15 foot zone until you get bit. The first bite tells you everything you need to know about where the zone is for that day. This requires a major shift in mindset. You have to stop thinking about your fishing in horizontal terms like casting along a weed line or a drop-off. You need to start thinking vertically. The entire water column is now the playing field, not just the bottom 6 inches of it. Imagine the lake is sliced like a cake. You are no longer just fishing the bottom layer of that cake. You're trying to find which layer has all the frosting. This vertical mindset changes how you approach a spot, how you work your lure, and how you interpret what the lake is telling you. It is the key to unlocking the suspended pike puzzle. It's a completely different way to fish, and it's way more effective. Let's paint a picture. It's a cold, grey February morning. You arrive at the lake. The old you would walk out to a deep hole, drill, and immediately send a heavy jig down to pound the bottom. The new you does something different. You walk out to a sharp underwater point. You drill a hole. You look at your flasher and see the bottom is at 40 feet. But you also see a big blob of bait fish sitting at 18 feet. Your first drop is not to 40 feet. It's to 20 feet, right underneath that bait. You are now fishing where the fish actually live, not where you think they should live. This simple change in your first action of the day can make all the difference. The single most important technique to master for this is the countdown method. It's simple, but it is absolutely critical, especially if you don't have electronics. You need to know the sink rate of your lure. Let's say you're using a swim bait that sinks about 1 foot per second. After your lure hits the water, you immediately start counting 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, and so on. If you want to fish at 15 feet deep, you count to 15 and then start your retrieve. You are now presenting your lure exactly in that target zone. This turns fishing from a guessing game into a game of precision. You are in total control of your depth. Now let's talk about lure selection because it matters a lot here. You need lures that are effective in the middle of the water column. This is where baits like suspending jerk baits, soft plastic swim baits on controlled weight jig heads, and even spoons or blade baits excel. The key is a lure that you can get to a specific depth and keep there. A suspending jerk bait is perfect. You can crank it down 10 feet and just let it sit there, right in a pike's face. A swim bait on a half-ounce head allows you to use the countdown method perfectly and swim it right through the baitfish zone. It's all about control and horizontal presentation in the middle of the water column. Just as important are the lures you should probably leave in the box, those super heavy 2-ounce jigs or giant tube jigs designed for pounding the bottom. They are the wrong tool for this job. They plummet through the strike zone so fast that a suspended pike barely has time to see them. By the time you start working the lure, it's already 20 feet below where the fish is. You're trying to call a fish down from the dinner table to eat something off the floor in the basement. It's a low percentage play. Lighter is often better because it allows your lure to hang in that critical mid-water zone for much longer, giving a pike plenty of time to commit. The retrieve is also different. For bottom fishing, you're often hopping or dragging. For suspended fish, the pause is king. This is the suspended pike pause. Whether you're using a jerkbait or a swim bait, you want to build pauses into your retrieve. Pull the lure a few feet, then stop. Let it sit there. Let it hang. This is when 9 out of 10 strikes will happen. A nearby pike sees this easy, wounded-looking meal just sitting there, not going anywhere. It's an incredibly easy target. They don't have to chase it down. They just have to swim over and inhale it. That pause is what turns a follow into a strike. It is absolutely deadly. I remember a day years ago, a classic example of this. I was on a lake known for big pike, fishing a deep hole for hours, dragging a big sucker minnow on the bottom. I had nothing, not a single bite. An old-timer fishing nearby saw my frustration. He came over and said, they're not down there today, son, try this. He handed me a lighter jig and told me to drop it down and count to 10, then just hold it there. I thought he was crazy. But I did it. On my third drop, just holding that jig still, 12 feet down over 30 feet of water, my rod just loaded up. It was a 38-inch pike. It was a huge light bulb moment for me. The fish had been there the whole time. I was just fishing in the wrong dimension. And this brings us to another myth we need to debunk, the idea that winter pike won't chase a lure. People think you have to fish painfully slow because their metabolism is low. While they might not chase a burned spinnerbait for 50 yards like they would in summer, they will absolutely move to intercept a meal. If a pike is suspended at 15 feet and your swim bait comes wandering by at that same depth, that pike only has to move 5 or 10 feet to eat it. That's a tiny amount of energy for a huge calorie reward. They are not lazy, they are efficient. They will absolutely chase, as long as the chase is short and the meal is worth it. Presenting your bait at their level is the key. So let's put this all together into a simple, step-by-step plan for your next trip. 1. When you get to the lake, your first priority is to locate the bait fish, either with electronics or by targeting high-percentage vertical structure. 2. Choose a lure that allows you to control your depth, like a swim bait or a suspending jerkbait. 3. Use the countdown method to precisely target the depth where you believe the bait fish are. 4. Employ a retrieve with long pauses. Work the lure, then let it hang in the strike zone. 5. If you get a bite, pay close attention to the depth you are at. That is the magic number for the day. Repeat that pattern. The biggest takeaway here is a permanent change in your mindset. Stop thinking of the lake bed as your primary target. Start thinking of the entire water column as a three-dimensional hunting ground. The bottom is just one part of it, and in winter, it's often the least productive part. The real action, the real life of the lake, is happening in that huge, seemingly empty space between the bottom and the surface. When you learn to effectively fish that space, you are playing a different game than 90% of the other anglers on the water. You are no longer waiting for a fish to find you. You are actively hunting the fish where they live. So let's wrap this up. The old dusty rule of fishing deep and slow for winter pike isn't just outdated. It's often the very reason you're not getting bites. The real key, the game changer, is to forget about the bottom and start hunting for the schools of suspended baitfish. They are the dinner bell, and the pike are never far away. The most crucial aha moment in all of this is realizing that for years you may have been fishing in a completely empty room. The pike aren't hiding in the basement. They're hanging out by the kitchen on the second floor, where all the food is. By simply changing your target depth from the bottom to the middle of the water column, you are finally putting your lure in front of active, feeding fish. This isn't just a minor adjustment, it's a fundamental shift that can take you from a string of zero fish days to some of the best pike fishing of your life. Thank you so much for watching. I truly believe this information can make a huge difference for you out there. If this opened your eyes, do me a favor and hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next tip. Now I have to ask you, have you ever had one of those weird days where you caught a big pike suspended in the middle of nowhere in winter? I want to hear your story in the comments below.